There we go.
That's weird. Okay,
The
now
music,
we're live.
The music is still playing. Are you hearing music? What is
Nope.
going on? Something is weird here.
Something strange.
There, it stopped.
Okay. Steve's having some interesting issues. Oh, look at the puppies, John. Sorry to the. Actually, if you're watching this, you can see the puppies in that John just posted. Those things are adorable. All right. Hopefully you guys can hear me. It is time for a roll call. We've got Jason and Jill and John and Rose and Rick and Sandy and Kelly and Michael. And I know we had, let's see. Oh, we've got Nuclear John, maybe? I don't know. It says he's playing a game, so I don't think he's really here. And Frank and Alistair. I think Alistair's here. All right. You're haunted, Steve. That's what they're saying. All right, I think I am going to go ahead and get started. I'm glad to see there's nerds here who are okay coming and not watching the game or watch the game and talk to each other in the chat room. Doesn't matter to me. I don't care. Oh, it's halftime. Man, that's the only thing I wanted to see. Thank you, Alan. I love it, Alan. I love that you do that every time for roll call. That's perfect. Welcome to the show. All right, Steve. Are you good for me to start?
I think so. How's my volume now? Is that better?
It's still peaking, but that's okay. Peaking?
I'll bring it down a little more. Okay.
All righty. I think I'm going to go ahead and get started. Are we ready? Hi, this is Allison Sheridan of the NosillaCast podcast, hosted at podfeet.com, a technology geek podcast with an ever so slight Apple bias. Today is Sunday, February 7th, 2021, and this is show number 822. Well, I'm really excited about this week's show because we have a fantastic interview from CES. I had the great pleasure of talking to the USB Implementers Forum chairman, Brad Saunders, and Ramal Ismail, the USBIF Chief Technology Officer. These two gentlemen explain USB 4 and why it's so cool. Brad starts with explaining USB 3 and all of the advances we gained with that. Then he explains what USB 4 brings us and where Thunderbolt 4 comes into play. Raman then does a demonstration of the power of USB 4. The interview is also available as a video, which might be fun to go back and watch to see the demo, and also to cement your knowledge on USB 4 by hearing it a second time. I've listened to it 3 times so far just to make sure I remember what I learned, and it was absolutely fascinating. All right. I think I lowered the intro too much.
Yeah, it was a little low.
Yeah, so I'll just... Kelly can watch me edit. I had Mike Price, who I don't think is here today. How did we have video from Alan? Do you see that?
Yeah, I don't know how that happened.
How did you do that, Alan? Alistair just called Kelly a dork. That's interesting. All right, let me try to check that volume again. Hi, this is Allison Sheridan of the NosillaCast podcast. Okay, that sounds about right. Okay, so Mike Price wrote a Keyboard Maestro shortcut for me that allows me to take the chapters that I've already written up in Mars Edit and pop them into Hindenburg. So with the correct channel or track selected, I mash down all of the keys and hit the letter H, and then I do a right-click, copy link, and then it beeps at me, and I hit Command-C to copy, and then it's going to populate it up here with the chapter name and the link to the chapter.
Auto-magically.
Oh, wow. Steve, I said the exact same thing at the exact same time. Oh, man. Oh, I like it. I like it. All right. So now I'm going to bring up this.
I'm going with Chit Chat?
Yes. This week, our guest on Chit Chat Across the Pond is Ken Ray, host of the macOS Ken podcast, hosted at macosken.com. You may have been wondering why Ken had never been on Chit Chat Across the Pond before, but you see, I just wanted to make sure he was going to stick with it, you know? Since he just hit his 15-year anniversary of doing macOS Ken, I decided it was probably safe time to have him on the show. So I'm going to start that over. I stumbled too much. That's all written out for me. I should be able to do that. This week, our guest on Chit Chat Across the Pond is Ken Ray, host of the macOS Ken podcast, hosted at macosken.com. Now, you may have been wondering why Ken had never been on Chit Chat Across the Pond before, but I just wanted to make sure he was going to stick with it, you see. Since he just hit his 15-year anniversary of doing macOS Ken, I decided it was probably safe to have him on the show. I asked Ken to come on the show to walk us through Apple's record-breaking quarterly earnings call and what the big numbers mean. So, how big is $110 billion? What drove Mac sales up 21%? What drove the services number so high? We had an absolute blast recording this episode, and he says he'll come back every quarter and do it again. I would love to do this. I think it'd be a fun new tradition for the NosillaCast. You can find Ken Ray on Twitter at macosken, and you can find all of his wonderful shows at macosken.com. I didn't say where you could get the podcast, but I guess that's obvious.
I'm wondering how many people have not heard macOS Ken or don't know where to find him.
Yeah, I wonder, is
Here.
anybody in the audience not know who Ken is? Jason pointed out Steve's present to Allison helped with the earnings. Yes, that is a true statement. Oh, Michael hasn't ever heard of him. Oh,
really?
He does a daily news show where he covers, it's kind of more from the financial standpoint, I would say. Be a description of it?
Not entirely, but he does certainly cover that. That's not the only subject.
Right, but it's a lot about it,
Yeah.
I think.
Especially after earnings reports.
All right. This article is thanks to Frank Petrie. Okay, muting Steve. By the way, this won't be a very long show because it's a lot of it is the interview. I found him from your prior times on his show. Wow. Jill and Sandy. I thought everybody knew him. All right, here we go. I finally understand why people like the noise cancellation on AirPods Pro, and it's all thanks to Frank Petrie and his review of the Chargin Airfoams Pro Active ear tips that he did back in December. Now, I don't want to repeat anything he said because it's a terrific review and needs no elaboration, but I wanted to add on my experience. I have the original AirPods, and I loved them. When the AirPods 2 came along with the charging case, I handed down my originals, and I loved the new version. I wouldn't actually recommend the charging case, by the way. I have a Qi charging pad right next to a lightning cable, and I always plug in over lightning to charge. I use the cable because it's faster than finding the right spot on the Qi charger, and I'm always sure that it is charging. Anyway, the AirPods Pro came out at an opportune time because one of my AirPods, the second version, it kept not connecting or claiming it had zero battery when it had been charging for literally a whole day. I bought the Pros and I was immediately disappointed. The smallest ear tips didn't keep the headphones securely in my ears. I was constantly knocking them out while on my interminable walks around my neighborhood, and I would usually say a non-Girl Scout safe word. Okay, not usually, every single time. I also didn't really favor the noise cancellation. It was okay, but I didn't understand why everyone was so gaga over it. I often trick Pat Dingler into entertaining me on my long walks, and after hearing me knock out an AirPod and swear at it on nearly every conversation we had, she suggested I try the Comply, C-O-M-P-L-Y, foam ear tips for AirPods Pro. I bought a set, and I would say they worked slightly better. They still fell out of my ears, but maybe only half as often. I went to the ChargeN site after hearing Frank's review of the ChargeN Pro Actives, and they had a video of a guy exercising by running up these really steep stairs from a beach up to the street. I realized that video was actually shot in my neighborhood. Well, this guy wasn't having his AirPods fall out of his ears. Maybe they would work for me. Before my Chargin Airfoams Pro Active showed up, I was listening to an episode of the Accidental Tech podcast where John Syracuse suggested something that seems obvious now that he said it, and yet it had never occurred to me. He pointed out that when you select your ear tips, you don't have to put the same size in each ear. In fact, he said it's unlikely your ear canals are the same size. That just basically blew the top of my head off. After messing about with the smallest tips on the Chargins, I ended up putting a small in my left ear but chose a medium tip for my right ear. Chargin says that since these are made of a memory foam kind of material, you need to put them in a specific technique. First, you squeeze the tip to make it small, then you shove the AirPod in your ear with the stem pointing straight forward, and then you kind of rotate it to clock it down into place. They say to keep holding it in place while the foam expands to fill your ear canal. I can even hear it expanding, so it's pretty easy to tell when it's done. You repeat for the second ear, and then you go run up and down those stairs. Now, while my main goal of not having my AirPods fall out of my ears spontaneously was immediately achieved with the Chargins, I had a very pleasant surprise. The noise cancellation of AirPods Pro is amazing. I can't believe I paid $250 for these a year and a half ago, and I never before heard what they can do. When I walk, it's like every car is an electric vehicle now. It turns out that's actually less dangerous because I know I have to be constantly on the alert for cars, not just the ones I can hear. I can enthusiastically add my 5-star approval rating to Frank's excellent review of the Chargin Airfoams Pro Active Ear Tips for AirPod Pro. I can hear you typing, Steve. How can I hear you typing? You're muted.
I don't know.
Wait a minute. Mute again and then talk? Yeah, I can still hear you. Did I mute the... Oh, I muted the wrong one. There we go. Now you're muted in... I was like, how could I hear him? I muted you in the wrong app. All right. Thank you, Frank. All right. And now we're good. Okay. Now it's the CES Implementers Forum. Okay. Here we go. Another magic chapter mark. Did you do a chapter mark? Oh, thank you, Sandy. Oh, Kevin's here. Hi, Kevin. And Rick said, save it. Man, if I didn't do one this time, this is a really important one to do because it's the interview. So I'm going to tell you guys something. This guy has the weirdest voice tick, I guess I would call it. He stops in the middle of his own sentences.
And not at natural times. Not at times
all.
for let's say a paused for dramatic effect. It's unexpected pausing.
Yeah, it's real strange. He just stops talking. So when I went through and edited his the audio so that it would because it was driving me crazy how many times he would pause. I cut more than 10% of the interview just cutting out his little pauses. So if you watch the video, it'll take you 4 minutes longer than it will to listen to the audio. Maybe used to stutter in its technique. Maybe it's I've never heard it quite like this. Okay, here we go. Let's hear this connection here. Proactive ear tips for AirPod Pro. Okay, that's too long. You like that chapter mark there, huh? Tips for AirPod Pro. We all depend on... Nope. Too soon. And I think that needs to go up. Ear tips for AirPod Pro. We all depend on USB in our daily computing lives, and the introduction of USB 4 is... Might be a little soon. There we go. Ear tips for AirPod Pro. We all depend on USB in our daily computing lives, and the introduction of USB 4 is bringing us huge advancements in what we can do with it. The USB Implementers Forum, or USB-IF, is a nonprofit organization, or corporation, I should say, founded by a group of companies that developed the Universal Serial Bus specification. USB-IF doesn't make any products, and they don't speak for any of the hardware vendors, but rather they facilitate the development of USB peripherals and promote the benefits of the products that have passed compliance testing. With that preamble, I'd like to introduce two people to you, the USBIF's chairman, Brad Saunders, and Ramal Ismail, the USBIF chief technology officer. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I told these guys that they could get down and nerdy with me, so buckle up, everybody. We're going to have some fun.
Depends on where your subject matter goes, of course.
Right. Well, so we know we're supposed to be excited about USB 4, but I think it's fair to say that most of us are probably under misconceptions about what USB 4 is and what it's not. Can you clarify this for us? What is USB 4?
Okay, so let me give you very brief background. So we all grew up with USB 2.
Okay, I'm going to actually cut this spot here because he takes forever to answer me. I have some fun.
Depends on where your subject matter goes, of course.
Right.
Okay, so let me give you very brief background. So we all grew up with USB 2, the original USB, and then super speed USB came out. And of course, that's associated with a spec that people know as the USB 3 standard. And for super speed USB, it brought a lot more speed than USB 2. We had 5 gigabit and 10 gigabit and 20 gigabit eventually. And please note, 20 gigabit USB required the USB Type-C connector. And super speed USB brought the ability to have data go both in and out of the computer at the same time. Much faster, plus it was bidirectional in data transfer. USB 4, though, is a new architecture is on top of that. And in fact, it's complementary to those two technologies. USB 2 exists in parallel to USB 4, just like it did in parallel to super speed USB. But USB 4 now takes the super speed USB and includes that protocol as one of some of the tunnels that it uses over the USB Type-C cable and connector. So USB 4 brought this ability to merge data communications as a separate tunnel from normal display communications. So if you're trying to drive a display, you can do that in parallel to exchanging data. Now, everybody has probably heard that USB 4 is another version, or at least based on what Intel delivered a few years back called Thunderbolt 3. So what happened was the Intel architecture for Thunderbolt 3 was contributed to the USB group, and we developed USB 4 to do essentially the same architecture, which is display and data in parallel, and it allows us to manage the bandwidth of the two. The data itself is super speed USB. It's our friend. It's just now being carried in one of the tunnels across the interface.
Okay, so the reason you're focusing on data and display at the same time is if you have a single cable going from your computer to a display to devices that are hooked up to it, then you'd be able to say write to a disk while sending video to a display.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
Exactly. So here's the motivation. When we developed the USB Type-C solution initially, we were taking this older style standard A connector and now making it a nice, simple, small, easy to plug in.
Reversible.
Flippable. Yay. Yeah. So as we did that, computers still had a lot of connectors. One of the other things we did in parallel to that, of course, is also deliver more power over that connector. So now the notebook computer was saying, oh, great, I got data and power, but I still have a bunch of other connectors on there. What are my opportunities to reduce the number of connector types on my product? The one that really stuck out was display, right? HDMI, mini display port, those various connectors. That is really what brought about the kind of early technology associated with this, which is the DisplayPort alternate mode, and of course Thunderbolt, which both chose to optimize trying to bring data and display out of the same connector.
I want to make you pause there a little bit because I've just happened to this week been learning a little bit about this DisplayPort alternate thing because I have an older DisplayPort Apple display and I wanted to plug it into a PC that's got HDMI. And that's a no bueno. I did a post, I think after I talked to you guys once before, entitled, "Just because it fits doesn't mean it'll work." And I knew I could get all the connectors together to plug it in, but I discovered that it didn't matter. I would have to spend a lot of money to make it actually do something.
Yes.
So DisplayPort alternate is some other technology?
The simple way to look at this is in the computer PC world, and I include Macs as PCs.
Yes.
In that world, DisplayPort technology is the predominant interface for external monitors. In the consumer electronics world, it's HDMI, TVs, right?
Right.
And in certain notebook brands, they kind of cross over because take a major notebook OEM, they cater some of their notebooks to business users, computer types. Hence, they have DisplayPort connectors.
Okay.
Or same company sells very similar computer to a end user who has televisions, and the thing they put an HDMI interface on it. It turns out you can bridge from DisplayPort to HDMI very, very easily. And as such, you'll find a lot of little adapters, dongles,
Yeah.
which are USB Type-C. They actually do DisplayPort alternate mode at the interface, and then they have an HDMI connector on the end.
Right. All I wanted was the other way around.
Well, that one's not commonly available, I'm afraid.
Well, I did find for about $100 I could get an active powered device that would do it, but
Right.
that it's doing all the math apparently.
In the reverse direction, I don't think it's quite as easy. Yeah, but
Okay.
it turns out DisplayPort alternate mode adapters to HDMI is a volume seller in that little dongle. But that said, most home users that are going out and buying new displays through their home offices, they're getting a DisplayPort oriented display, or better still, one that has USB Type-C connections directly on it.
Yeah, it seems that USB Type-C is really starting to take off in displays now. I just interviewed ViewSonic where they were showing off all of their USB-C displays. And that just brings joy to your heart when you see that. When you have a USB-C display and USB Type-C, that's the shape of the connector, USB Type-C on a laptop, what is the protocol that's going across that? Is that DisplayPort? Is it HDMI?
No, in most cases today, it is DisplayPort using what we call the DisplayPort alternate mode.
All right. I'm going to cut you guys off there. Yes, Steve. Okay. I have, let's see, I'm going to probably go a little short so you guys can get back and watch the game. All right, chapter mark. Not quite yet. Talking without moving your mouth. Yeah, I was thinking about how weird this video would be to watch later. I'm just going, and it's moving away. Nice to see you, KJ Miller. What's your full name? Your given name? I want to call you by the right name. All right. Thank you very much for coming, both of you.
Thank you for having us.
All right. Okay, I told you guys that was good. Isn't that amazing? I just love everything I learned there. I really got a kick out of that, and I think I'll probably go back and listen another time just to, again, like I said, make sure I remember everything that they taught me. Well, this week I'm not going to panhandle for the show, but I do have a request. If you could take a moment to do a review in Apple Podcasts for the NosillaCast, Chit Chat Across the Pond Light, and or Programming by Stealth, that would be swell. Now, I know Apple Podcasts may not be your podcatcher of choice, but evidently it's the only game in town for podcast reviews. And if you review the show and, you don't hate the show, it can get more people to know about the show. So that would be really fun for everybody. And so I'd really appreciate it if you gave the shows a review. Alrighty now. Oh, chapter mark. That was a close one. Almost forgot. There we go. So, Kelly, this chapter mark thing is fairly specific to the way I do my show notes. My show notes are in Mars Edit, so this is the original. Let's see. Yeah, good. You have that full screen. So right here, for example, here's the link. From here to here is the link to my ViewSonic article that I'm about to read. So if I look at that in the preview in Mars Edit, it looks like a regular link. So I can right click on it and I can copy the link, then Command C to copy the text of the link. And that's how those things are getting put in there separately from using the Keyboard Maestro macro that Mike Price wrote. So if I do Shift, Control, Option, Command H, it switches over to Mars Edit. I right click, copy link, Command C to copy the text, and it pops it into the right appropriate places. And the reason he had to do that was because, like I was saying, Hindenburg isn't a standard Mac app. So one of the things they disobey is they don't retain focus on a selection. So if I select this this cell here, come on, there. If I select that and then I go away and I come back to paste it, it's not selected anymore. So I have to double click it again to select it again. And doing that in all three fields was over, back, over, back, over, back. Oh, it was so annoying. And that's why Mike wrote that macro. I would rather they just keep focus. That would have been fine. That would have been a lot less work. It's really nice now because it is completely automated, but that's
focus,
why
people.
What's that?
Focus.
All right.
Last segment. Boy, we're clicking
Yeah.
through this. This would be a quick
am.
one tonight.
All right, I'm going to mute Steve here. Yay, Keyboard Maestro. And of course, we'd give you the macro if you end up needing it. You could probably modify it to some other suite of tools. All right. Oh, I loved learning how to make a podcast while watching this. That's nice, Joel. Thanks. All right. A few weeks ago, Ray Hedrick of ViewSonic came on the show to talk about their USB-C line of displays, which I feel haven't gotten much press in the Mac community. ViewSonic loaned me the VP2785 2K. This is a 27-inch display with 2K resolution and has a plethora of connections to suit every need. While this display supports USB-C with all its USB 3.1 connectivity goodness, it also has ports to allow it to be backward compatible with older technology. We'll get into the connections in a bit, but let me explain why I chose this particular model from ViewSonic. ViewSonic has a lot of models of displays. And by a lot, I mean 119 if I counted correctly. The first two digits of the ViewSonic monitor's model number tell you who it's designed for. The VP series I'll be talking about here is for their professional line of displays. They've also got VA for home and office, TD for touch, VG for business, VX for entertainment, and XG for gaming. Within each of those categories, they've got 22-inch, 24-inch, 27-inch, and 32 inches and up. The VP2785 2K is part of their professional line and supports a resolution of 2560 by 1440, otherwise known as 2K, and it's priced at $613. That's the list price. You can get a little cheaper elsewhere. While 4K or even 5K displays are amazing, they're out of reach in terms of price for a lot of people. So I chose the 2K display to see if maybe it hit a sweet spot with better resolution than 1080p, but not at the expense of 4K. To give you a frame of reference, the equivalent professional display from ViewSonic at 4K is $919, so it's $300 more than the VP2785 2K. Boy, that number just rolls off the tongue. I've got to keep saying it, though. The VP2785 2K comes with a stand, or you can use it with a standard VESA mount. If you buy it with the stand, you tilt the display onto the bracket of the stand, and it locks into place with a definitive snap. Actually, I just added some words that aren't necessarily true. Boy, that number just rolls off the tongue. I've got to keep saying it, though. The VP2785 2K comes with a stand, or you can use it with a standard VESA mount. You tilt the display onto the bracket of the stand, and it locks into place with a definitive snap. You probably remember my complaint about the height adjustment on the Pro Display XDR from Apple, which is ergonomically bad for a woman of normal seat height. I have to tell you, I have no such complaint with the ViewSonic. I can bring the bottom of the display down to only 2 inches above the tabletop, which is actually significantly lower than I need it, and it has an upward travel range of 5.1 inches from there. Now, I can't use it standing like I can with the XDR, But you know what? If you really want to use a display standing, wouldn't you need the desk itself to go higher anyway? I'd rather have it be the right height when I'm sitting. The VP2785 2K can also rotate 90 degrees right or left into portrait mode. It tilts forward 5 degrees and back 21 degrees. The VP2785 2K has an anti-glare coating, but I had a particularly challenging window behind me at one point, and I found the ability to tilt useful to help eliminate the little bit of glare I was experiencing. It also rotates on the base, which is kind of cool. In case you're worried about the display moving around too much, there's a pin you can insert under a discrete black rubber gasket on the support that will hold it still. Now, my first use of the VP2785 2K was to hook it up over USB-C to a 16-inch MacBook Pro. I'm a tough judge of a monitor since I've been looking at 500 nit brightness displays at 5 and 6K for the past 5 years. At first, looking at 2K at 300 nits versus 5K at 500 nits, there was a notable difference. But after working with it for a while, I stopped noticing the lower resolution and brightness. Having recently had the pleasure of working with a 1080p screen, the VP2785 2K looked great. I cannot get used to 1080p anymore. When I looked at this, I kept reminding myself that this good-looking screen was only around $600, not $1,000 like a 4K screen. Most people seem to lower the brightness on their displays, so I think 300 nits is probably great for the vast majority of people. Like I said, I do like a really bright screen. I'm picky about that. But I put a photo in the show notes of the ViewSonic display next to the Pro Display XDR. It's a totally unfair comparison with the XDR at literally 10 times the price, but I think it actually shows how good the ViewSonic display looks. It's almost as bright and the color almost as true using the Adobe RGB setting on the ViewSonic. One of the great joys of USB connectivity for displays is that this one cable can carry the video signal, audio, data, power, and USB. Remember just hearing about it from the USB forum guys? Anyway, I plugged in this one cable to my Mac, and then I plugged my Logitech C920 webcam and my Samsung Meteor mic into the display's two USB-A ports. I used the included USB-C cable to connect that display to the Mac, and as expected, the USB devices worked, the video looked great, and because the VP2785 2K supports power delivery, it also charged my MacBook Pro. Now, it's only a 65-watt charger through the display, but that's actually enough to keep up with the 16-inch MacBook Pro. It's kind of confusing. It's supposed to be 95 watts, but it seems to do just a fine job at 65 watts. It just takes longer. It'll keep up with it at least, won't let it drain. I used the VP2785 2K with this setup for a Zoom call, and it worked perfectly and simply. Now, I mentioned up front that the VP2785 2K has a lot of connectivity and supports older technologies. I took a picture of all the ports on the display so I can match them up to the spec sheet and be able to explain what they're all for, because there's a lot of them. I do have to admit that I had to bring in my research assistant, Stephen Getz, for this part because I couldn't quite figure out why some of these connectors were there. The ports are broken up into two groups, those for display and those for USB. On the display side, there's the USB-C port I already mentioned, and that's the one that gives you power delivery and USB and video all over that one connector. But it's also got HDMI and two DisplayPort connectors. I had to ask Stephen why there would be two display ports, and he explained that this is so you could daisy chain two displays together. Makes sense. See why I keep him on staff? On the USB side, I should say, I got really confused. There's a second USB-C port, and the spec sheet says 15 watts downstream. Well, I knew that the other USB-C port had 65 watts of power delivery, so what's this one saying 15 watts? I don't understand. Stephen explained that it allows you to charge a phone or a tablet on that second USB-C port. Again, makes perfect sense. Next are two USB-A ports, and I explained earlier that when I had the display connected via USB-C, I plugged in a webcam and USB microphone to those USB-A ports. But next to the USB-A ports is a USB Type-B port. USB-B is the connector you see on printers and other peripherals. It's kind of a square thing. I was simply baffled why the ViewSonic display would have this port. Back to Stephen for the answer. He pointed out that when you're using USB-C for connectivity, the display becomes a USB hub automatically. But if you connect over HDMI or DisplayPort, then the USB signal hasn't been delivered to the monitor. To get USB to the display, you need to connect a USB-B to USB-A cable to the computer. I tested Stephen's hypothesis. I hooked up the M1 Mac Mini via HDMI, and I tried using the USB-A ports for a keyboard and mouse, and as expected, they didn't work. That was with them connected straight into the display. But then I connected the included USB-B to USB-A cable, and the keyboard and mouse started working. I didn't get around to testing the included DisplayPort to DisplayPort cable because I was too lazy to dig out enough adapters to make that work. I really don't take for granted that ViewSonic includes the cables you need. I mean, seriously, how rare is that? While the VP2785 2K really does have you covered with pretty much every connector you could need, I do have one complaint. I really, truly dislike the placement of the connectors on the back. All of the connectivity is on a backplane that faces down, but it's not at the bottom of the display, it's from the middle of the display back. That means if you tilt forward the 5 degrees it can go forward, you can't see the connectors from the back because it doesn't tilt forward far enough. And from the front, even tilting it 21 degrees back doesn't give you any view at all. You can't see under there. I even had the display on the edge of a desk, and I kneeled down on the floor and tried to look up, and I still couldn't see all the connectors. My solution was to take that photo of the backplane that I told you I took, and I took that with the display lying face down on a table. So I took that photo. Now I've got a reference photo. That way, later, when I was swapping cables in and out, I could refer to the photo so I'd have a starting point of where a connector was and then blindly try to connect the cable. Maybe the best method would be to plug in all the cables with the display face down and just leave them hanging off the back and only plug and unplug them from the computer side. One thing I'm not used to is having controls for the display available on the display itself. The VP2785 2K has a touch-sensitive power button in the bottom right. I'm a fan of touch sensitivity, but I've bumped it accidentally a few times while adjusting the display height or angle, and at first I was really confused when the display wouldn't work. It turned dark. I'm sure you could get used to it, but it did, kind of surprised me. Next to that power button are 5 little white dots. These are also touch-sensitive buttons. With these controls, you can change the color profile, switch inputs, adjust contrast and brightness, and adjust the volume. I was surprised to see a volume control because the VP2785 2K doesn't have built-in speakers, but Stephen Getz pointed out there is a headphone jack in the display section of the connectors. I fished around on that underneath connector panel until I got my headphones plugged in, and sure enough, I could hear Bart's dulcet tones from a recent Programming by Stealth episode. Now, the odd thing is, you can't control the volume to the headphones from the Mac. You can only control the volume and mute via these on-screen controls, and the process is laborious. Here's the order of what you got to do. Tap any of the 5 dots, and that brings up this control window on screen. Tap the dot under a right chevron button that'll allow you to navigate to the next tab, which is volume, because it starts with input select and then it's like audio adjust. Then you tap the dot under the check mark, and that selects that volume control. Tap the dot under the check mark again to get to the volume slider. Finally, tap the dots under the left-right chevrons to move the volume up or down. In these same menus, you could get to mute and change the audio input, but it's just as tedious. I don't know about you, but I think I'd plug my headphones into my computer and have 2 cables to connect rather than go through all that faffing about just to adjust the volume. I'm not sure why other manufacturers like LG make monitors where you can adjust the volume with the keyboard controls or the sound preferences pane, and you can't with ViewSonic. I checked in with ViewSonic on this, and they do have an application called V-Display Manager that lets you adjust the volume through software, and you can adjust the color profiles and other settings through that instead of these laborious on-screen menus. It seems kind of like a lot of overhead, though, to launch an app when you just want to turn the sound down. I was also a little disappointed to see that the V-Display Manager software was not a signed application. It's kind of, I don't know, it feels a little like they're bolting on the ability to work with a Mac. It's kind of afterthoughty. Well, now, I don't keep any Windows machines in my house, and at first it was a matter of protest, but these days I'm a bit less rabid on the topic. I just haven't gotten around to having a Windows PC. I happen to have the opportunity to test the VP2785 2K with a Windows laptop, though. Over USB-C, the display worked a champ, exactly as it did on the Mac. Over HDMI, something odd happened. The cursor was noticeably jumpy on screen, which I didn't observe when I was connected over USB-C. I contacted ViewSonic about it, and they suspect that the PC had chosen a 75 Hz refresh rate rather than 60 Hz. Unfortunately, I didn't still have access to the PC to test the theory. And with a Mac connected, it defaults to 60 hertz, and the display preference pane will not allow you to change it from 60 hertz. And so I couldn't force it to go to 75 to try to break it. But the fact that the Mac is forcing it to 60 hertz makes me think they were probably right about that refresh rate. The bottom line is that I find the VP2785 2K to be a very solid display with good resolution at 2K. It's very versatile with 3 different options from the fairly modern USB 3.1 to HDMI and DisplayPort connectors. The price point in the mid $600 range makes it much less expensive than 4K displays and yet much better resolution than the cheaper 1080p displays. They also, like I said, they have a lot of different models. They do have a 2K version in their VX line, which is even less expensive. So that might be worth looking at too. I put a link in the show notes to all of the different models. On the VP2785 2K, I wish the connectors were easier to get to, but I love the display height allowing for good ergonomics regardless of seat height. And did I mention they come with every cable you could possibly need? If the VP2785 2K isn't quite the display you're looking for, like I said, remember ViewSonic has 118 more. If you narrow it down to just the professional line, there are 63 from which you can choose, 6 of which support USB 3.1 over USB-C. The 4K version is $919, as I mentioned, but think about this, that's almost $400 less than the 27-inch LG 5K display. If you're in the market for a new monitor, I'd give ViewSonic a look. Check them out at viewsonic.com. Save. Yes, I will save. What did I miss?
So Kelly, I think, has two are they
2K displays?
ViewSonics? I think she said that.
Oh, really?
Are we right, Kelly? Something about talking to Chuck about having two side by side.
She has LG 4K displays.
4Ks, okay.
Not ViewSonic though. You know, I'm really torn on this. I mean, the display is fine. Like I said, it's solid, but I had some PTSD from my Windows days. You know, things were harder than they should have been, like those connectors. Just like, really? I mean, I literally could not see them in any way that I moved them. There was some other question I was going to ask. Well, you guys didn't chat very much. Well, 86 messages. I guess you did.
Did you want to say anything about?
Is yours an LG also, Alistair? What was that, Steve?
Did you want to say anything about the USB-C 3.1 versus 3.2? Or is that worth bringing up?
Yeah, So these guys tried to correct me in saying that it was USB 3.1. They said, no, it's USB 3.2. So I sent them their own spec sheet that says 3.1 all over it. And I triple checked the model number about 6 times. And then, what was the other thing? Oh, then the guy said, we didn't send you the VP 2785. We sent you the VX 2785. And I wrote back, I said, yeah, that's what I thought too. I had half the article written when I realized I went to look at the spec sheet and I couldn't find the model that I thought I was reviewing, and it was because it was the VP. So I don't think they sent me the model they meant to. I think they meant to send me the around $300 2K display.
So you should have gone out and bought a VX and sent them back that one. Kept the VP.
There you go.
The professional version.
Okay, Alistair's got the 4K too. Yeah, the price difference between the 4K and 5K LG is phenomenal. It's quite different. Oh, John says he has the 27-inch UK 600 4K. Who's that made by, John? It's a little bit. Oh, it's LG. Huh. HDR is a little weird to figure out how to watch. I've been listening to John Siracusa on the Accidental Talk podcast talk about it, and it's really hard to see whether it's really doing what you think it's doing.
And doesn't it only engage under certain use cases?
Yeah. Where was that? Shoot. There's a website where you can actually see the difference.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, the demo
actually-
that you showed me.
Yeah, there's this weird demo that they posted a link to. It's a white page, and if you're looking at it on a display that will display HDR, it actually says the word white on top of the white. You can see that it's whiter than white. But if you're not looking on an Apple display, it's not there. We dragged it between actually no, you guys could be right. We dragged that web page between Steve's 27-inch iMac display and over to the LG 5K ultrafine display, and you couldn't see the words white on white. They weren't there. So I don't think it does HDR.
Or at least it's
Yeah,
not
I don't-
implementing. Yeah. Oh, we didn't get that neon effect, though.
Well, no, he's
maybe mine's-
changing the display to HDR. You could do that to yours. I think that option to turn on HDR has nothing to do with the display. I don't think it matches up with whether the display can do it, because this little rinky-dink $200 portable USB-C display, this one I can turn on HDR, and I'm fairly positive this doesn't actually support it, and it gets all weird looking. So I don't think that the LGs do HDR, but don't take my word out for it. I don't actually know what I'm talking about, but that's my observation. I wonder if we could find that website again. Let me finish recording and then I'll look for it, because it was really interesting. All right, here we go. All right, muting Steve. Oop. Well, that's going to wind us up for this week. Don't forget to send in your dumb questions, comments, and suggestions by emailing me at allison@podfeet.com. And you can follow me on Twitter @podfeet. Remember, everything good starts with podfeet.com, right? You can go to podfeet.com/Patreon if you want to become a patron of the Podfeet podcast. If you'd rather make a one-time donation, we've got PayPal. And of course, it's at podfeet.com/PayPal. Want to join our Facebook group? podfeet.com/Facebook. And if you want to join our Slack, it's at podfeet.com/Slack. And if you want to join in the fun of the live show, head on over to podfeet.com/live on Sunday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific time, like KJ Miller did this week, and join the friendly and enthusiastic NosillaCastaways. Thanks for listening, and stay subscribed. Oh, jeez, I messed up subscribed. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening, and stay subscribed. That didn't sound natural.
It's not like you ever say that phrase.
I know. It's pretty funny. Let's see. Enthusiastic NosillaCastaways. Thanks for listening, and stay subscribed. All right. Okay. So I bet if I bring up Safari, and I think you can search history, right?
Yeah? How long ago was it, though?
Show all history. I don't know.
like
How
a
far back does
week.
it go? What's that? Oh, it's
It was a
been
week.
weeks.
Weeks?
Found it. Ha!
All right.
God, I'm good. Okay. So I can't see it right now because actually it's probably not coming through on the display, but I'm going to drop the link in here. And if you look at that, like on your iPhone, it does support the HDR. So right now, you probably can't see this, but in the middle of those words, in the middle of that white space, I can see the word white written in whiter than white.
So why do you think we can't see it? Because we're
Well-
not broadcasting HDR?
Yeah, probably not.
Probably
I don't know.
because Mimo doesn't support HDR.
Yeah. So tell me if anybody can see that. If you can see that on your, that's the one, Steve, you should be able to move that back and forth. Okay, Sandy sees it on her MacBook Pro, and yeah, Alistair says he can see it on his MacBook Pro screen, not on the LG. That's what makes me think it doesn't support it.
Yeah,
So that has to do with
I see
HDR.
it on the iMac, but not on the LG.
Actually, he says, if you look, the developer, I just assumed it was a he. She says, tests so far seem to indicate this only works on the Apple platforms. HDR capable Macs and iPhones.
Interesting.
and has a list, and then there's a section on how does it work. On my iPad Pro, I see it. Yeah, Kevin can see it. Yeah, that's... So there's hidden videos playing at the corner of the page. When an HDR-capable browser encounters one, it switches to HDR mode. For some reason, CSS backdrop filter plus brightness greater than 100% combo seems to behave like HDR, reaching beyond the user-controlled display brightness up to the maximum HDR brightness, while everything in between follow along. At least that's the overall idea, but I still don't know exactly why it works, especially why those with those two CSS properties. Once the system switches to HDR mode, it seems to affect the whole display. That says as long as you can trigger HDR mode by any means, simply playing an HDR video on Movist, for example, the CSS trick works on Safari, Chrome, Edge with HDR-capable SDR devices. This indicates this bug feature is mostly tied to the EDR system. Is that cool? Okay, Jill says she can't see it.
Only on Apple devices? Did I hear you say?
Yeah.
It works?
That's what they're saying. So maybe it has nothing to do with HDR. I don't know. It's cool though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Frank says he owns a Mac
An iMac
without a screen.
Yeah.
iMac without a screen saves some
Those
money.
are hard to find.
That's a good move there. All right, let me pull in my outro. NosillaCast outro. So you have a favorites bar on the right-hand side, Kelly, that you can keep like jingles and such in there. And stay subscribed. There we go. And I'm going to export, and I think we
hold
can
on.
call it. What?
Let's do a chapter marker count.
Chapter count?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you should have 4.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, you do? Okay. I
1,
couldn't see the 4th
2,
one.
3, 4.
The 4th one's buried.
If I change the size, it'll mess up what you can see.
Got it.
I can't make 3, 4. Good?
Yep.
Good job. I forgot the chapter mark check. All right. Export audio. And I think we can let class go 9 minutes early. Is the game still on?
They just finished halftime or in the second half? Third quarter.
It's Apple's HDR implementation. All right, Alistair, I would like a full explanation.
So John's asking about not finding it in the App Store. What?
He's asking Frank something. I don't know what Frank's talking about. Frank is saying aloha. I don't know. It's called the Oh No Mac. I don't know what they're talking about, dear. I'm not responsible for Frank. Trust me.
Nobody is.
All right, Frank, it is good to see you back.
Yes,
I
it is.
wish you the best of luck with everything. All right, I think I'm going to let class go early, Steve.
Let's do that.
All right. Thank you for coming. Nice to see you again, KJ Miller. And I think we'll call it. All right. Kill it, Steve.
Good night, Gracie.
Bye.